on in to another episode of Getting Well with Terry and Friends, NHL Preview Show Edition. I'm Terry, Ryan beside me, Ian down below, and we are ready to take a look here at the San Jose Sharks. So we will jump right into it here. Additions and subtractions. We'll be going the same kind of layout as we did yesterday. I have the information up here. Looking at it, additions for the Sharks. They added some third line forwards, I think, some fourth liners. I think some bottom pair of defensemen. Aaron Dell. I'm not sure exactly where he fits in on the team. In the depth chart, he's kind of number 4, but I guess they're just stocking up in case something happens. Nico Sturm, former Wild player. Luke Cunnin, also former Wild player. Nico Sturm, I was sad to see him get traded to Colorado. I think he's going to have a really good shot here in San Jose to have some big minutes that he definitely wasn't getting in Minnesota or Colorado. But I think here in San Jose, there'll be a lot more opportunity for him. Oscar Lindblom, obviously wish him all the best. A fresh start here with San Jose as well. And if you look at who left the team, Brent Burns. That's the big name there that's been with the organization for years. I guess kind of a cap move there. And as we'll see coming up here, even with that move, the Sharks are in cap trouble. So that's something to definitely look at. Alex Stalock played one game, returning to the Sharks. He's also gone. Jonathan Dahlen, that's a surprise prospect there. Sawchenko as well, Dzingel. So looking at it here, subtractions, additions, kind of about even here. I think there are some young players that are coming over, like Kunin and Sturm, Lindblom, Nudavara, that will get some big minutes here with the Sharks. But that's not really the best thing when you're looking at those type of players. They're kind of bottom forwards, kind of in my opinion there. We will go to Ian first here. What do you think, additions and subtractions?
Yeah, it looks like a team that's looking to keep the rebuild process going. That's what it looks like with the additions that we've seen. No big name, top 6 bona fide forward additions. No great, spectacular, dominant defenseman in terms of a bona fide top pairing defenseman or top 4 defenseman added. This is essentially a team, I think, that's in the tank for Connor Bedard's sweepstakes. I think they're in the mix with, a bunch of other teams that on paper just aren't going to have a very competitive roster, a very competitive team. Where we talked about Anaheim earlier this week, they bring in a John Klingberg, even just on 1 year. That's, to me, a signal from their management team that they're trying to be a contender, at least for a playoff spot this year. We see none of that from the San Jose Sharks with these additions. Luke Cunnin's probably the best player on the list, but it's not a guy that's going to absolutely move the needle a ton for you offensively. And keep in mind, this was a San Jose team that couldn't put the puck in the ocean for much of last season. A very, very bottom tier offensive hockey team they were a season ago. Just struggling to score goals repeatedly, averaging barely 2.57 goals per game. I mean, just horrible offensive numbers last year. And the addition of Luke Cunnin will help that a lot. Steven Lorenz, I like him as a depth player, but he's probably going to be asked to carry the offensive burden, the likes of which he's never had to do before, especially in Carolina, where he came from before. It's just Benning and Nudavara are decent defensemen. They're not phenomenal. They're not like those bell cow defensemen that are going to play in every situation for you. It's just you don't have to say anything about Farmer and the Dell, Aaron Dell. You're not trying to be good in goal if you're bringing that guy onto your hockey team. So, when I look at it here for San Jose, it's just a bona fide mess right now. And it's a team that in a division that is an absolute beast. I've said this already this week on our previous videos. They look like they're bringing up the rear. And at the end of the day, it may not be even close. So the overall impression of additions and subtractions is this is a team that's going to have a tough time winning hockey games. It's a team that's going to have a tough time staying competitive. And it's a team that probably is looking at the future and maybe getting a little fortunate come draft lottery time next year. And maybe a certain Connor Bedard lands in their lap.
Yeah, for sure. Ryan, what do you think here? Additions and subtractions.
Well, a few things that I can add is that in addition to these additions and subtractions, we should also mention Mike Greer as the GM and David Quinn as the coach. And I think there's a lot of pieces here, and we know the first line is what that is and what that's going to provide, but then there's a lot of question marks. William Eklund is a talent and could make this team. He didn't play in the juniors so that he could focus on his professional game. There's some questions on the defense, and with an injury or two, this could be a complete disaster on defense. And also, I should mention that this list you have here could change in the very near future. There's a number of potential trade prospects on the team. There's let's see, just a number of people that Radim Simic has aired some grievances about the team, and he could get traded. There's just a number of potentials, and they're carrying 7 goalies, which makes no sense at all. So there's probably, if there is demand for goalie in the league, they could be selling. So I'm not going to say that they're going to be, make the playoffs, but I think there's a lot of pieces here, and it depends what Greer and Quinn decide to do. If they want to stock their team with prospects, it could be rough. But if they want to keep some experience in some of these positions, they could be competitive.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there, as I said, we'll get to their cap situation coming shortly, but there's definitely trades, or definitely more trades or something on the horizon for the Sharks. Saying that, we are filming this August 25th. Today, Phil Kessel signed with the Vegas Golden Knights. So had we done the Vegas show yesterday, we wouldn't have had that. But every day, people are still signing kind of late in the summer. Turnsy asked, where did Brent Burns go? He went to Carolina. So he is in Carolina.
Yep.
And Jay Stone excited for Farmer and Liddell. He's ready to bet against him. Should you get the opportunity, I don't really expect him with the amount of goalies they do have to really.
No, they've got James Reimer, Kaapo Kakkonen, and Aiden Hill all ahead of him in the depth chart.
Yeah.
Like, how the hell does Aaron Dell get a chance here unless they just suffer cluster injuries in goal? I mean, that's the only way I see it happening.
Or some trades, but we'll look at the top prospects and upcoming free agents here for the Sharks and their cap situation. As I said, they are currently $2 million over the cap, $84 million currently with $82 million cap. So they're 2.1.
That's after shipping Brent Burns' big money contract out the door. So
exactly.
Something.
Upcoming free agents, some names here: Timo Meier, Bonino, who's currently going to be their second or third line center, which is definitely saying something. Matt Nieto, Nudavara, Ryan Merkley. I'm assuming they will definitely try to sign because we'll take a look at their defense coming up here. But when it comes to defense and prospects, as we see here, the Sharks really need defensemen. That'll be definitely they're looking. They'll be looking at the next couple of years. I'm definitely assuming, and then Reimer and Aiden Hill, both UFAs after this upcoming season. So not a whole lot of cap space here leaving the team either. Timo Meier, they'll definitely try to keep him, I'm assuming, or definitely trade him for future pieces. But when you're looking at top prospects, William Eklund, by far their number one prospect. When you look below that, definitely some possible pieces here, but kind of thin when it comes to prospects here for the Sharks, in my opinion, at least. So that's kind of basically the outlook here. Is the Sharks still have some stuff they got to do here? Ryan, what do you think? Prospects and upcoming free agents and cap space.
Well, the one player I would add is Thomas Bordelot. He's he's been penciled in as making the team and perceived as a star prospect. But the question is, does the organization want to put him on the fourth line where he may languish, or just keep him in the AHL? So he may make the team later in the season, but that's one player I would add to this.
Yeah, I have him in the lineup, just not in the top prospects there. Ian, what do you think? Prospects, upcoming free agents?
Definitely not what we've seen the last couple days from the likes in their previous teams that we've talked about, the Kings and the Ducks, from a prospect pool perspective. I mean, we talk about the Kings have been consistently the last couple of years top 5 and deepest prospect pool in the NHL. Anaheim, an above average prospect pool. William Eklund could be really good. He's the one guy in this prospect pool that stands out heads and shoulders above the rest. He's going to be he was knocking on the door of being a permanent fixture in the Sharks lineup last year. It would be no surprise to me if he's on the roster this year. He's going to give them some much needed offensive pop. He's definitely going to be that kind of player for them. So William Eklund, and keep in mind, he was in the AHL most of last year. That was not a good AHL team, and he had a good year, though, still for them. So Eklund's the one that stands out. You know, from a forward perspective, the prospect pool for them is, I think, okay, decent. It's still not as good as a lot of other teams, but it's decent. The problem is they've ignored the blue line. There's not a single blue line prospect that right now you can look at with San Jose and say, that's a guy that's going to be a surefire top pairing defenseman for me for the next 10 years. And it's almost like they've ignored the blue line in the draft, or they've made some picks and these guys have, and they actually did pick some defensemen, but I'm reading things where a lot of these guys, their development is not progressing as much as they would have liked. And they're not really taking that progression, taking that next step, you know, furthering their development. So they look like they're going to be, at least prospect-wise, very thin on the blue line, and it's going to probably translate to the Sharks roster this season and beyond. It's just not going to be a very good or deep blue line, and we're going to have to get used to that. I mean, we'll get to the lineup in a second, and I'll have a ton to say about that and how weak it really looks in a bunch of different spots, but I think the blue line is probably as weak as it gets in terms of depth throughout the entire organization right now, current roster and prospect pool combined. The free agents, you know, Bonino's probably out. Nieto, you know, I could see it going either way with him. I think Nudavar is probably just a 1 year and out type of defenseman signing for the Jackets, so I don't think they'll retain him. Reimer and Hill. Reimer, you know, is a guy in his 30s now. It's probably someone they'd part ways with. Gives some of your younger goalies in the prospect pool a chance, or maybe give Aiden Hill an even bigger look. He's still pretty young in compare, or Kakkonen for that matter, if you're that high on him. But again, Kakkonen's been caca, you know, a few times last year. Too much for my liking. So he needs to keep on improving there. So, you know, when you look at the free agency situation, you know, Timo Meier is someone you'd like to lock up long term, and he's going to be restricted next year. But how anxious is he going to be to return here? I mean, this is a team that for I would say the next year, if not 2 or 3, is not going to be a very good hockey team. You know, does he want to come back to a situation like this? So tough times right now for the Sharks with Timo Meier maybe long term. But you're right, the prospect pool, it's okay at forward, but it's like they've ignored the blue line. And I think we're going to see a lot of signs of that this year and moving forward.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was making the preview show, when I was making all the stats here, is
like
that
they did pick some defensemen, but unfortunately, the defensemen they've taken in the draft the last couple of years, the fewer defensemen they did compared to the forwards, they're not developing the way they thought. I mean, they've not really improved their game and to a level that the Sharks were hoping for, considering where they took these guys. And that's a huge problem. You swing and miss multiple times, especially in a position group like defense, like they have. It's going to take you a while to bury yourself or dig yourself out from the hole you bury, you know, because the blue line is integral these days in the National Hockey League. You need puck movers. You need guys that can play at both ends of the ice. And San Jose Sharks, they have a dearth of that right now, and it's troubling.
Yeah, and we'll get right now to possible lineup. This is what I came up with here with the lineup. We'll look at forward first. Timo Meier, Logan Couture, Thomas Hertl. That is a pretty good first line. So that they are looking okay on the first line. But after that, Nico Sturm, Oscar Lindblom, Luke Cunnin as your second line. Bonino, Nieto, Barabanov as a third. And then basically question marks when it comes to the fourth. William Eklund, obviously I have him down here. If he's in the lineup, he's most likely going to be down in the second line spot, I'd assume. If he makes the team, he should definitely make the team. But obviously still a question mark, so that's why I have him down there. Looking at the blue line, these two guys right here make a ton of money. So when you're looking at the Sharks cap situation, these two here are reasons why they are in cap trouble. For defense, Mario Ferraro, Ryan Merkley, those are their best two prospects, I guess, when you do look at defense. Their best younger defenseman. But nothing really, not a really great blue line either. Goaltending, I think they're okay. Goaltending, I think they're actually okay. Reimer, obviously has his troubles, but he's been steady the last couple of years. He's been pretty consistent. Kakkonen, not consistent. Can play very well, and I've seen that with Minnesota, but can also not have so good games. And when he went to San Jose, it was not a good move for him in the first year. We'll see what happens. Aiden Hill, he could definitely take one of those two spots as well. So when looking at the possible lineup here, obviously, as Ryan said, there's probably going to be changes. This will definitely not be the opening lineup. I'm sure there'll be definitely changes here. But looking at it right now, it's pretty weak compared to other teams in this division, in my opinion. Ryan, what do you think? Possible lineup?
Well, I have my own lineup, and I have probably half a dozen different names. And I don't think it's worth really discussing that in too much detail, other than the fact that that's basically symptomatic of how this team is set up. There's just this whole mix of people that can fill the third and fourth line, and we don't know what it's going to be. Some other names I can throw out are Noah Gregor, who's he's inexperienced, but he could take a leap and could maybe end up in the second line. So there's a few. I have Barabanov in the first line, so you have it in the third. So it just depends on the situation and where he ends up. But that's just symptomatic of what the Sharks team is. It's got there's this top tier of forwards, and then there's just kind of this big mix of players that could end up filling these lines. And I think it when you're looking at like a point total, if you're going to bet on a point total, look and see what they do in camp. Look and see how they fill out these lines. And if they're putting in a lot of prospects, they're kind of swinging for the fences and trying to develop. But if they put in some solid veterans, they may be going for a respectable win now approach. So I think that's worth looking at when you evaluate this team.
All right. Yeah, my lineup I just kind of threw it together. So it's not like no disrespect, obviously, to Barabanov or anybody. It's just kind of what I threw together looking at their lineup. But just kind of my opinions. William Eklund, if I was the coach and he was on this team, he'd be definitely on the first or second line, because that's a player that you want to show the fan base. You want to show off to the fan base because you still need to sell tickets too. That's something that San Jose is going to have to look at, as well as their attendance, how far it drops with the lineup. Ian, what do you think the possible lineup here?
So last year, Alexander Barabanov, I think he works hard. I think he's improving himself in terms of, can he be a viable NHL player? Yeah, of course he can be, but he ain't a top line player. You were seeing late in the season last year with the boogeyman, Bob Boughner, of course, is no longer the head coach now. He was up on the top line for the San Jose Sharks last year. This is a guy with 16 goals in 92 NHL games. And this is a guy playing on the top line for you. 13 goals. I actually gave him too much credit. 13 goals in 92 NHL games for Alex Barabanov. And I'm hearing David Quinn talking about him too, and that he might look to give him a top 6 role. A guy with 13 goals in 92 NHL games. That's where we're at with this San Jose team offensively. We're at the point now here when you look at the roster, you keep Hertl, you keep Meyer and Logan Couture under wraps. What else do you have? Who is going to be someone that's going to take a leap? You're going to need one, if not two, if not three players from the rest of the 9 forwards to take a leap and give me 20 goals. where you don't have Barabanov giving you a track record of that. Nick Bonino's not a guy that can give you that really anymore. Kevin LeBanc could, but he's coming off a season marred by injuries. That's a concern. Lindblom, it's a great story, him coming back from his cancer scare and his diagnosis there. It's wonderful. But is he going to be someone that you're going to bank on for a big offensive uptick in his production? And then the rest of them, you're talking about guys that have been basically scored, barely 10, 15 goals in a season as their career bests. That's what's littering this lineup. That's why it's hard for me to see them being a much better offensive team. I mean, they were only 2.57 goals per game. They were a bottom 5 offensive team last year. I don't know how this lineup on paper looks much better. I know our guy Turns, he says bet some overs and I actually think the defense and the goaltending could be even worse, but at the same time, they also need to score some goals, and I don't know how much they're going to do that this year with this roster, especially if, the opponent clamps down on Meyer and Hurdle and that group. So that's the worry for me. The blue line is another shaky situation. Again, Erik Karlsson's better offensively than defensively. I've said that for years. Marc-Edouard Vlasic, last year was the first year I noticed his defensive play finally declined a little bit. Like, this guy's been a very, very good defenseman for well over a decade on this team. One of the guys still there from all those great playoff years of the San Jose Sharks. And last year was the first year it's like, okay, I see wear and tear on this guy now showing up. He's not quite that shut down, force on the blue line maybe he was 5-10 years ago. You got some upside with Ferraro and Merkley, but again, they're putting these guys in top 4 forward defensive roles, top 2 pairs. Are they ready for that? Are they ready for the minutes responsibility? Are they ready to face, Troy Terry and Trevor Zegras every night? Jonathan Huberdeau in Calgary every night? Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and Kane in Edmonton every night, and try to shut down those guys? Doesn't look like it to me, because we haven't seen them in these kind of spots before. And they're going to have a huge responsibility defensively to handle some really talented, top 6 forwards in this division. So that bothers me too with Ferraro and Merkley. And keep in mind, Merkley in particular is a pretty good defensive prospect. Ferraro, solid, but you're asking these guys to be great now if they're going to play the minutes we think they might. So that becomes concerning. And James Reimer's capable of being great, and he's capable of getting lit up for 6 goals. That's what you get from James Reimer. Kokkonen, too inconsistent for me in his split time with Minnesota and San Jose last year. Aiden Hill, talented at times, but again, he's dealing with injuries a little bit. So, I don't know if the goaltending, quite honestly, is good enough to make up for just a ton of issues with lack of depth on the blue line. And so the problem is, you want to bet San Jose games over the total. I could agree with that because I don't think the blue line's great or depth-laden, nor do I trust the goaltending. But I could also say the same thing about, the offense. I mean, who is going to score consistently? Who's going to give me 20 goals? Who's going to give me 25 goals? Who are going to be those players for me to put it together and contribute offensively if Timo Meier's shut down and Tomas Hertl is shut down? I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I did not have LeBanc on there because of his injury. I should have definitely had him because I'm sure. Is he ready to go? Do you know, Ian? Or
see, it's a wait and see.
Yeah.
It looks like right now with LeBanc. And keep in mind, when it comes to him, he's been good offensively at times for the Sharks in the past. But again, he had the shoulder issue last year. He hasn't played since December of last year is when it took place. They're hoping, a training camp potentially, but and it looks like from all indications, barring a setback, it looks like he'll be ready for training camp. So if that's the case, I mean, they need all the help they can get offensively. They will welcome back Kevin LeBanc with open arms. Just hope he can stay healthy because obviously the injuries derailed the season last year where he only played the 21 games. But keep in mind, this is a player that in the past, he's chipped in some goals and had some nice seasons. I mean, and even then, his hallmark, his high water mark in terms of goals, 17 back in 2018 in an 82-game season. So he is going to help, but he still hasn't even cracked 20 goals in the season in his career. So that's where we're at with San Jose. It's going to be pulling teeth to find guys to step up and put the puck in the net.
I saw one source that said LeBanc, they want to develop LeBanc so that they build his trade value.
I think they will. I think there's some truth to that. You put him in a top 6 role, feature him. Maybe you get something good from him offensively. We've shown glimpses of it. Stays healthy. Can he give you a good first half, and then you flip him at the deadline and maybe get something in return? I could see them going that route.
Yeah, the Sharks definitely need to do well drafting the next few years, and in my opinion, at least. We'll look at their last 5 years and the futures here for the Sharks. Second round exit there in 2017, 2018. They made the conference finals in 2018, 2019, but since then have been around 7 games below 500. 5 games below 500 last year, 77 points in an 82-game season. This year, their 70-point total is 74.5. So around 3 points less there. They're plus 900 to make the playoffs, minus 1,600 not to, plus 15,000 to win the division, plus 18,000 to hoist the Stanley Cup. Basically, what I'm seeing here, I think you have to look at point total under. The Sharks haven't really bottomed out their last 3 years. They've had losing records, but nothing horrible. Like they still haven't really bottomed out. And if they want to really look for the future, I think you got to bottom out here. You got to build up your prospects. You got to get lots of draft picks. You got to get lots of young prospects. And to do that, you kind of need to go back in the standings and get some higher picks. So obviously, we don't know what the Sharks are going to do with the rest of the offseason. But as it stands right at this moment, I would be looking at the under 74.5 points. Obviously, I'm not taking minus 1,600 to miss the playoffs and wouldn't touch the other futures, but it would be under 74.5 points for me and the Sharks this year. Ian, what do you think? Last 5 years and the futures for this year?
Yeah, there's no argument for me. Under 74.5 would be the way to go. 77 points last year for the Sharks and still didn't make the playoffs. And there's no doubt this roster is worse. And again, say what you will about his faults. Is Brent Burns, the defenseman he was 5 years ago? No. But he's still the best I think they had last year in terms of well-rounded. I mean, he's good offensively, good defensively, plays in all situations, plays big minutes, has great responsibility on the blue line, and just taking him out, you see that just how the chain reaction it brings to the entire blue line. It's much worse there, much weaker, much greater amount of lack of depth on the blue line. So, to ask this team to just be 3 points worse than last year is not asking too much, in my opinion, especially when you see just the other teams in this division, every single one of them better on paper, in my opinion, than San Jose. Even Seattle, I think, has improved to the point where they're going to be better than San Jose this upcoming season with what the Kraken have done. And I love the 1-2 punch we're going to see long-term for years there with Shane Wright and Matty Beniers at center for the Seattle Kraken. Great one. You got to be strong down the middle, and Seattle's going to be that. So then it goes on without, how I feel about Anaheim. I think they're going to be a little bit better this year. And of course, it goes without saying Calgary's right back to being in the playoff mix. Edmonton, LA is a ascending team. I have questions about Vegas, but come on, you've still at least got to put Vegas ahead of San Jose, even with some question marks about the Golden Knights. So it leaves San Jose bringing up the rear in this division. And again, because you're playing teams in your own division so often, man, they're going to suffer some tough nights this season. So, under 74.5, definitely, I think, the way to go.
All right. There will be spots that you will want to look at the Sharks. And against the LA Kings, for some reason, the Kings struggle against the Sharks. So obviously it'll be a new year, a new roster. We'll have to see if that continues.
And one last thing I'll add, Terry, about San Jose, if you want to bet against this team, and I know there's going to be a lot of people that will want to, you get on them early, October. You don't hesitate. You don't wait around. You bet against them as often as you can early, because if they're as bad as I think they might be first few weeks of the season, you're going to see minus 300s, minus 250 to lay with the opponent against San Jose on a regular basis. Whereas in October, you might get something a little bit more digestible, a little bit more manageable to take the opponent against San Jose. So definitely take advantage early, because kind of like, what we saw with Arizona a lot last year, the really bad, worst teams in the league, eventually the betting markets and odds makers, they will price you out of fading a team game in and game out.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Ryan, what do you think about the last 5 years and the kind of the futures here for the Sharks?
Well, as far as the point total, I think I'm going to wait and see what happens in the weeks ahead. See how this team develops, see what happens in camp, and maybe just there is this going to be a rebuilding year with a capital R or a lowercase r, and maybe gauge from that. I will say about the NHL, this is a sport that in 2018 the Golden Knights went to the finals as 500-1 underdogs. So, stranger things have happened, and we've seen it in the fairly recent past. So, don't shy away from that 180-1 price. Someone mentioned in the chat earlier about betting the over and under against this team. This team was the worst in the league against the over. So that is one thing to keep in mind. So if you really want to bet the over against the Sharks, you're basically saying that this defense is taking a really big step down, which may in fact be the case. But I guess a word of caution is that this was the worst team to the over last year in the NHL.
And profitability with the Sharks was one of the worst as well. Now, there were a lot of teams that were worse than San Jose in terms of profitability last year. Let me just find the chart here. I had it on the screen. Here we go. This is last year, regular season NHL profitability. We had San Jose checking in 8th worst team in that regard in the NHL, minus 11.7 units of profit last year for the San Jose Sharks. Believe it or not, you lost more money last year with the Islanders, the Ducks, the Kraken, the Devils, the Canadiens, the Blackhawks, and the Flyers than you did the San Jose Sharks. So still, you were down money last year betting on San Jose every game, and it's probably going to be tough to be profitable with them. That being said, it's all a bit depending on the price point. If San Jose is going to be plus 300 dogs, after the first month or two of the season because they're so bad and they're able to pick off a few big upset wins every now and then, that's going to help out or at least minimize the damage in terms of the units lost on the season for a team like this. So all depends on the price point, but I wouldn't expect to be San Jose to be a profitable team. They might be closer to even, maybe a smaller loss, but I think they'll still be a money-losing team.
For sure. That's it. Kind of a shorter show for the Sharks today. We kind of went over their situation. Tomorrow will be the Vegas Golden Knights. We'll go over that. No show Saturday, and then we will have a show Sunday for the Seattle Kraken. And then we'll kind of start with Calgary on Monday and work our way through. But if you like the content, smash the like button. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Make sure to follow Ian at Babano. Follow Ryan at I am Hydrogen1. His link will be in the description below as well. And we will see you again tomorrow for another episode of Getting Wild with Terry and Friends, Hockey Preview Edition. Have a good one, guys.